Welcome back to Houses and Spouses.
Today we're interviewing Waliya and Ismael, a couple that own several investment properties that I'm particularly excited to be learning from because my little dream is to own a little bed and breakfast somewhere on the beach when we retire with a house full of guests.
I love that. We're totally going to make that happen.
Before we begin, remember to like and subscribe so you don't miss any of our future episodes.
So let's dive in and learn about real estate investing.
Hi, I'm Dan.
And I'm Anya.
Together, we bought a house in Austin, Texas.
And it's changed our lives.
I discovered a passion for real estate and embarked on a new career as a realtor.
And I fell in love with interior design and home improvement projects.
Now, we're on a mission to share the home ownership experience
by hearing other couples talk about the ups, the downs, and everything in between.
This is Houses and Spouses.
Welcome, Waliya and Ismael. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to dive right in. We understand you're into investment properties, and we're wondering how you got into that.
It's a good question. It's been some time. About 20 years ago, someone randomly called me, and I bought a couple of small properties that didn't go so well, but have paid attention to investment properties and the potential of them for years and years. Through college and coming out of college, I was doing house painting. So I worked for a lot of investors. I saw folks making a good living and securing their retirement off it. So it's been something I'd always been interested in.
And for me, it wasn't really that top of mind until my dad decided to retire. He has a couple investment properties. And when he said he wanted to retire, my sisters and I were like, well, can you really afford to? I don't know if that's a good idea. And he sat us down and kind of went through all the finances. And at that point, we saw really how key the investment properties were to retirement income, to supplementing, the social safety nets that really are so filled with holes that you really don't help anybody. And so at that point, it really clicked to me that this is really something that we should think about doing. At some point, it was really just, I didn't have a plan for it, but I knew it was important. And then in the last year, things just kind of fell into place where we ended up with a few.
And was this planning with your father before or after you met Ismael?
I think it
was right in the first year of marriage.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you both had your own entryways into it.
Exactly.
So what motivated you to buy in Austin?
So I'm from Austin. I went to high school and college here. And so I will say our investment properties are actually not in Austin. Our home is the only one in Austin. Okay. But we decided to move here just to be closer to family. We've got 2 toddlers and a baby on the way. We just needed a change in the pandemic. Just want to be closer to family. So it just made sense to come back here. And we really got lucky with this house. We were here for Thanksgiving last year. And we just decided, we were like, we don't know when this pandemic is going to be over. I, at the time, wasn't working. Ismael, his job had gone remote. And so we were like, well, let's just come to Austin for a year. Let's just see what happens. Let's ride out the pandemic here. So, okay, let's do it. And then, so that was like on a Saturday. And then on a Sunday, the next day, we were like, let's just go see what's out there. And I had seen this neighborhood driving around, and we came in and they had 5 lots left, 5 houses left, spec houses. And we saw the lot here, and just, it was a beautiful lot with all these trees. It was nice. It was at a price that we could have afforded at the time. We had the money for a down payment. And so we were like, let's think about it. And it was in the right location. I'm a South Austin girl. It was in South Austin, 10 minutes from my sister's house, 15 from my parents. So we're like, hey, we'll think about it and we'll come back and we'll let you know. And as we were leaving the subdivision, we drove by the sales office, which is a model home. And there were all these cars coming. And we were like, okay, no, we can't wait.
We just need to tell them now.
Yeah. So we just went in and said, okay, we'll take it. Here's $1,000. Just hold it for us and we'll take it. So it was just a really quick decision, and it worked out really well for us.
Wow. So you bought a brand new house, right?
Yeah.
New construction.
Yes.
Where were you coming from?
We're coming from Raleigh, North Carolina.
And that's where your other investment properties are?
So we have one there.
We have 2 there.
We have 2 there, 2 there, 1 in DC now. So we have a total of 3, and our home is here in Austin. And I think, again, it was just kind of funny. Even our home in Raleigh, our first townhouse that we bought there, which is now a rental, was similar, just kind of lucky, seeing a sign at the right time, being being able to get something built before anyone else noticed it. And that just seems to be a theme for us, how sometimes it's just luck and you're in the right place at the right time. But in both cases, we were prepared to make a move very quickly.
And I think it's because we're very decisive. We know in our heads the things that we want. And if we see something that fits that checklist, we just pull the trigger. We both have siblings who are super indecisive and they could have never done that, but we're like, let's just do it. And for us, the reason we didn't sell our house in Raleigh was because it was going to be a great rental. We were fortunate enough to have enough for a down payment here. And the Raleigh market is just growing and we didn't want to lose. And my dad, especially. So again, my dad, he was like, even if you are losing money on a monthly basis on the rent right now, which we're not, because even if you are, just hold on to it, because think of it as you're putting money into an investment and it's just going to keep growing. He's like, whatever you do not sell this right now. And then, so that's how we ended up with that. And then before we got married, Ismael had a house, and you can kind of get into how that ended up into 2 investment properties.
Yeah, it was, again, just kind of some luck involved. I bought a house in Falls Church, Virginia, which is just outside of Washington, D.C., where I grew up, in 2010. So it wasn't quite the bottom, but it was as we were emerging from the bottom. When we got married, I moved to Raleigh. My mom was living in the house. So she spent a few years living in the house there, just paying, essentially paying the mortgage. I didn't really care, just as long as we're breaking even. Excuse me. And when we decided to move to Austin, we also were like, Mom, you really need to come down here. Both your sons are here, your granddaughters are here. There's no point in you being in DC. So we're able to sell that house. But of course, it was technically a rental the last few years since it wasn't our primary. And I had to use the proceeds from that sale in a 1031 exchange. And we decided initially we were trying to get something near NC State in Raleigh for all cash. Then we decided, you know what, here's an opportunity with really low interest rates still, even for rentals, to put down a lot of this money and get 2 properties. So we were lucky enough where took the proceeds from the house in Falls Church, Virginia, and we're able to get another rental in Raleigh, which gives us 2 there, and 1 rental in Arlington, Virginia.
Got it. So you bring up something really interesting. Can you explain to our viewers what exactly a 1031 exchange is?
Yeah,
because I think that's important for people to know.
Yeah, it is. And it's something I didn't know about either. So if you have a rental property, and I'll make the numbers really simple. Let's say you bought it 5 years ago for $100,000. Right. And let's say this year, because the market is really hot, you can sell it for $250,000. So you have a gain of $150,000. If that was your primary home, you're not taxed on that. But since it is a second property or rental, you have tax liability on that $150,000 unless you move that money into another, what it's called in the IRS code, like similar commercial, a like similar property, which is a very broad term. And you essentially move that money into that property, you won't be taxed on it. So that's, I believe it's IRS code 1031, hence the 1031 exchange. The funny thing about it is you're all excited on closing day because you made this big sale. You get $0 out of it. All that money goes immediately into an escrow account, the entity holding the 1031 exchange money. And you have 45 days to identify a property and 6 months to close.
I'm glad you brought that up. So remind me, did you buy the second property in the same state?
So when the second, this is how it worked out. So we moved to Raleigh, we moved from Raleigh to Austin. So at that point we have 1 home in Austin, 1 home in Raleigh, 1 home in Falls Church, Virginia. In July, sell the Falls Church, Virginia home. There's proceeds there, roughly, I don't remember off the top of my head, but a decent amount of money. Sure. And at the end of August, we purchased 1 new property in Arlington and 1 additional property in Raleigh, North Carolina.
Got it.
And part of that reason was, and especially for Ismael, who is born and raised in Virginia, and really it's an important place to him to have a piece of that area that's still ours. Initially, we had thought about making an Airbnb, and so that way we could go stay there. Has a lot of family there. We have a lot of friends there. The issue we ran into with an Airbnb is that there's no furniture available right now because of the supply chain issues. Right. So we had gone to IKEA. We were like, oh, we'll get all this furniture. We had set a date for him to go get, set up the Airbnb. But then when I went to online to order the furniture, literally everything except one rug was out of stock. And the supply chain issues are so bad, we just couldn't wait. So we were like, there's a lot going on in our lives right now. Let's just rent this out for a year, and then we can convert it to an Airbnb later so that we benefit from it. You know, his mom is living with us. When if she wants to go back and hang out with her friends and family, we have that space. So eventually I think we're going to change that to an Airbnb, but right now, because of the logistical issues, it just didn't make sense. So that's why we have this one place there and then two in Raleigh, because then we can have the same management company. It's easier to manage that when they're in the same place.
So it sounds like you guys are building like, portfolio of homes that you own. And it sounds like it's happened like, well, as an investment, like it's happened, by happenstance in some way or another. But do you have an ultimate plan for like an ideal number of homes that you want to own?
I think my goal is 5 by 50, and we're going to have 4 by 40. So we're getting there. But I think, to me, when I think about the residual income we can get in retirement, and can that essentially maintain our lifestyle that we have, right? Just based on your rental income, without even touching 401k savings, we don't know how that'll look in 30 plus years, or without touching any type of social security, can we maintain via our rental income over time? So I think 5 by 50, that gives us several years to get another one. And then over time, that income will continue to grow as you pay off those mortgages.
Got it.
And we're even talking about ways that we can take advantage of it now. We're thinking in the next 18 months or so, we're going to need a bigger house or a more of a forever home. And we were just like, oh, well, we can't sell them, but we can take HELOCs and use that towards a down payment. And then the rent will then cover that HELOC. So there's already ways to kind of move the money around so that it benefits us immediately, but then also in the long term, and benefits our children in the long term as well.
Okay.
That's really smart. So how do you manage the out-of-state properties?
Yeah, it's I think the most critical thing is finding a not just good, but a great property management company. And we found in North Carolina, there's someone we work with. She is wonderful. She's watching the place. She rents it out. I don't even have to think about it. It's a bigger national company, but even when it's a big company, the folks who are in the area are critical. So really taking the time to get references to know who are good folks to actually manage property, so we don't have to think about it.
Got it. Okay. And I'm curious, like you guys own property in Virginia. You mentioned you have property in North Carolina, and now you live in Austin. So have you seen a difference in the markets between those three states? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Ismael's always watching the housing.
One of my obsessions is just looking at house listings on Zillow or Redfin or whatever else. So it's really interesting. I feel like the Austin and Raleigh dynamic were very similar this past year, where there wasn't enough supply and demand was through the roof. And it was in the sweet spot where it's affordable for, say, an older millennial couple that's looking to move into a home, right? Where you can get something in the 450 to 600 range. And, I feel like that's a sweet spot for, again, a late 30s married couple. Though the demand on those houses in Raleigh and Austin, as was through the roof. So suddenly something that in December was 450, like our home, is appraising for 550, but selling for 600 in April, May, June. And that was the same thing in Raleigh, just absolute bonkers in the springtime of this year.
Right.
I think it slowed down that growth, but you still have the gains maintained and locked in from what happened in the springtime. In the Northern Virginia area, it wasn't quite as dramatic. Inventory was low.
Sure.
But you didn't see the prices go from, let's say, 500-600K last November to 900K today. There's still very good appreciation and folks did well, but I feel since it was a more expensive market, your sweet spot there, something you get here for 450 to 600 was more like 800 to $1 million up there. So you're not going to have that 40% jump, but you'll still do well. So Austin, Raleigh, very similar dynamics. Northern Virginia kind of depends.
So Waliya, you grew up in Austin, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What about the cities? Like just between, like, can you talk about just the difference between living in here versus there?
Yeah. So for me, Raleigh reminds me of Austin when we first moved to Austin. I moved here in 95 when I was in middle school, and it was just this small city with a lot of potential. And so I'm seeing, we saw that growth while we were there, and it's happening even more. We know with Epic Games announcing it's settled, putting its roots down, and Apple coming there, it's really booming in that way. So it's very similar to me. Austin now is so unrecognizable to what it was, before. I know a lot in good ways and bad ways. It's funny. I've always loved California, so I'm like, I don't mind the Californication of Austin a little bit.
Right.
Although the housing prices are really, really disappointing, I will say. I would have loved, and I'll give my parents' house in Circle C, bought it in 1996 for 180. And it would probably sell for 7 something now. It's just out of control. So that is really disappointing for me to see how unaffordable it has become to be close to the city. Because as we talk about where we want to live, it's like the typical snobby stuff of, oh, I want great schools and I want close to the city. So those things are hard to find. And also, I think we also have a unique situation, which we will, God willing, have 3 kids and a grandma with us, right? So as much as I would love to be we could maybe afford a 2,500 square foot place in a certain neighborhood. That's not going to be big enough for us unless maybe we have a yard that we can add an ADU to. So, so it's very different than when we first like, let's go to Austin. We could get this nice big house here. Like even Lakeway. I look at the prices that from a year and a half ago, how they've just jumped almost 30%. Is really crazy. And I will say one thing that, it's not much about affordable for older millennials. I do want to recognize that we have a certain amount of privilege that allows us to do this, right? My parents paid for my college education. We have good paying jobs. We're educated. We're children of immigrants, yes, but immigrants who came on educated visas, who are from countries where the British also colonized, so they spoke English, So I don't want it to make it sound like, oh, it was just so easy, but it's because there's certain factors that I consider that we have privilege that not everybody might have. And that's really important when looking at the housing market, is that it's not accessible to everyone in the same way.
Right.
That's a really good point. I appreciate you bringing that up for our viewers. I know a lot of people express concern about being able to afford a home, but you mentioned looking for a house, and I'm wondering how you go about doing that. Are you working with a realtor? Are you looking wholesale on your own?
So our last 2 houses we've just stumbled into them on our own. So we told you this one in Raleigh, we had gone to see a house and the showing agent ended up just becoming our realtor because we found another house that was about to be built on that same street. So so far we've just literally been extremely lucky and just kind of fallen into our houses. Ismael is always in his free time just checking out Zillow and looking at Zillow. So one thing that I mentioned is, if we want a certain location, maybe we are going to have to look at a tear down. So I'm trying to enjoy. We've only been in this house for 4 or 5 months. I'm like, let's just enjoy this house without thinking about next. But I think we're too type A and too forward thinking to even not think about what's next.
Yeah. What part of Austin are you in? You're in South Austin? Where at in South?
Yeah. So we're technically in Menchaca. So just outside, just south of South Park Meadows. So our address is Menchaca. So that's Bear Creek Crossing is our subdivision. And there's a huge one being built right across the street, Hills at Estancia. So we're 35 and Onion Creek.
Got it. Yeah, that's a lot of new construction over there.
Yeah.
How do you like it?
So far, so good. I think my big challenge in moving here is everything's 14 miles away and a 20 to 25 minute drive. Just going to wherever where I was from an area, and even in Raleigh, where I kind of had a 5-mile radius bubble all the time. So I think that's been my biggest adjustment is, put in the GPS, like, oh, that's 18 miles away. Okay. That seems close, but I love this neighborhood. It's a great mix of having our neighborhood, plus there's a ranch nearby with longhorns and just having nature around, which I think has been good for our souls, both of us this year, just being around nature and close to, seeing ranches. It's incredible.
Well, and this area is it's about to just boom, right? So we're 2 miles from Buda, and then Kyle's right there. Now they're going to build a domain-like development in Kyle. There's a Costco coming there. So as the residents are pouring in, I think there's going to be a lot more things in this area as well. It's just, again, my default is Southwest Austin. That's what I know. That's what I love. And so it's like, we just always go there, and downtown's really close, which is important to us. We like the things in downtown. I think even though we both have remote jobs, we would like to have a place to go to. So as we think about what's next, we do want to be accessible to downtown. But also the highways are growing. I was telling my parents, when we first moved here, Mopac ended before William Cannon, ended at 290. And it would take forever to get anywhere because of those lights. And now it's so quick. So I think as the city is building, the infrastructure is going to start keeping up as well. Like, I'm interested to see what happens with 35 downtown with the textile plans. So there's just like a lot of change coming. So I think that it's going to be interesting to see what happens in terms of adjusting for the new population in terms of services and transportation, but also to see what happens as the city becomes unaffordable, what happens to the surrounding area and how that changes.
Maybe your fifth property is in that.
Yeah, exactly.
I would love to get a ranch here. There's a ranch around the corner. Like, I want a ranch now. Yeah. So we'll see. We'll see what that is.
Yeah. I was wondering if you two could talk a little bit about some of the value of long-term benefits of owning investment properties for our viewers.
Oh my goodness. It is, there's so many benefits and so much value you get out of it. I think one, again, just having income coming into you. I know the last year's been a little bit of an outlier with that, with some of the, legal issues and whatnot with evictions, but for the most part, you're going to have steady income one way or another. So I think that's number one. Number two, there are significant tax advantages. You will be able to find, there's depreciation that you can write off. Any expenses you put in these rentals, you can write off. So just the amount of tax advantages you get out of them, tax benefits are phenomenal. And number three, I think there's just this sort of intrinsic, almost emotional thing. Like, hey, I've got properties, I've got roots, I've got something tangible. Versus, I know, again, our generation and younger, we have more nomadic lifestyles, but actually owning not only your own property, but investment properties and knowing you're building a future with it, there's a real, to me, emotional, intrinsic value.
Yeah, and I would say one other thing, this came up with my dad. He was over and we were talking about both of his tenants or in one of the units said, are you going to raise our rent? Rent is going up so much, I can't afford it. And we had this discussion about what makes sense in terms of raising the rent for his tenants. And he didn't want to raise it that much because he just didn't think it would be too much, even though it would have been within the market rents. And my sister was like, well, Abu, he's living his value. He's creating affordable living for others, right? So there's this aspect where you can, if there's the mom and pop landlord who is able to help out their tenants in tough times. And then there's like the venture capitalist, private equity who is like, oh, you missed one rent payment, you're out of here. Oh, guess what? We're going to raise your rent $300-400 next year per month, which has been happening. And so there's also this altruistic, all those things are really important. Like, I'm not going to pretend like we did this for altruistic reasons. We did it because we wanted to make our money, right? But there's this other aspect where you can help, live your values by creating affordable housing if you're in that position.
That's very heartwarming to hear.
Yeah, absolutely.
What advice do you have for couples who are looking to get into buying investment properties?
Do it. Number one, I think it's a challenge because you don't think, oh gosh, maybe that's not for me, or I don't want to be a landlord, or there's many downsides. Right? You can think of, I'm sure you know this as well as us, right? There's so many potential downsides, but number one, you just have to do it. And I think in our case, why we're in this position is when we saw something we knew we could afford and we just went after it. We didn't think twice about it. So number one, just do it. Number two, educate yourself and be prepared. I think talking with folks who are landlords already, talking with realtors, talking with tax advisors, finding, again, I never knew what the heck a 1031 was until I spoke with my tax advisor. Talking with folks who may not be landlords themselves, but are part of the support system to make it work, to own investment properties. And then number three, just have a goal and be prepared. Again, I said 5 by 50. We've slowly been saving. It's not like, we've ever had a windfall or anything like that. It's just been slowly saving and kind of working our way through it. So with the goal and with somewhat of a plan, we've been able to get to this point.
And I think two things that I would add to that is with house buying in general, you don't need 20% to buy to get a mortgage or for down payment. We don't think we ever put 20% down. You pay a little bit of PMI mortgage insurance. If you're in a good market, which happened to us both times, the house value goes up and you don't even have to pay the entire X amount of years of PMI, your house value goes up. And so it's not as intimidating as it sounds. 20% is a lot, but just know that you can get something with little as 5%. That's Raleigh House is 5%, right? Yeah, 5%. And then in terms of investment properties, I'm a house snob. I'm like very particular about things. When you're buying an investment property, you're not living in it. It doesn't, so don't think about, well, that bathroom is not the kind of bathroom, like, I don't like those, what is the parquet floors?
Yeah.
Whatever. I'm like, I don't like those floors, that carpet. Someone else will like it. So as long as it makes business sense, it's in a place that will be, that is, safe, good to live in, and, that will be rented out easily, just go for it. So it's not like this pristine, beautiful Instagrammable house. It's a place where someone is going to want to live because, we talk about the Arlington house or the apartment condo being a place where someone in their first job, like out of college, is going to live. It's a great place. It's an okay place to live. It's not special, but it gets the job done, right? So don't look for this perfect place to buy. Just look for something that's going to be, that someone will rent out. And so that's more of a business decision than an emotional, personal decision.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because in real estate, as a realtor, we often talk about like how you don't want to be the biggest house on the block. You don't want to be the smallest house on the block. You want to be kind of similar to everybody else on the block. And that you bring up a good point, Waliya, in terms of like not caring so much that the floors aren't the floors that you would live in per se. Will it rent, right? If that's what your ultimate goal is. So I'm curious, like, do you have any advice for people? I mean, or anything that you wish you had known when you started that you would like tell to somebody else who was just starting out in investing?
Ooh, that's a great question. I think the biggest thing is preparation. And number one, again, understand that you really want to do this, that you want to go down this route. And then number two, just doing the work to prepare. Again, we've prepared for years. This didn't happen overnight. Right. Even though it seems like it, like all of a sudden we're like, oh my gosh, we've got 3 right now, but this was years and years of certain things happening. So just be prepared, be patient, and understand that, this is the long game. This isn't like 2003, 4, 5, where everyone's flipping houses. This is very much a long game, and think that way.
And I think that's a good point. You have to start somewhere, right? So you talk about how, like, the first house that you bought, the one in Virginia, like how long it took for you to get it. And it wasn't really the house that you wanted, but it just made sense. And you just got it. So you just pulled the trigger, and that led to this series of events, right? So you never know where your starting position is going to be. I think the mindset has to be buying a house, full stop, right? Whether that's going to be an investment property or for you to live in. Once you get that, it's much easier to take the next steps and to do the next thing.
So with all this preparation, management, and time, how has investing in homes together changed your relationship as a couple?
That's a great question. I feel the way we grew up, we grew up in similar ways, but differently. So those experiences, and it comes together with the investment properties. Funny enough, I think I am less risk averse. I'm okay with debt, as an example. And I feel that it's brought us closer together in terms of our financial goals and how we view money and how we view finances. That money, that you don't want too much debt. You don't want to like be super leveraged. I'll give you an example. I got an FHA loan for my first home, right? So again, that's 3% down and super leveraged. So you don't want to do that, but don't be afraid of it either. That yes, you're going to have a mortgage, but that it can, again, as Waliya said, kind of build from there. So I think it brought our just financial perspectives closer together.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is I think it just gave us a sense of security, right? In a world of unknowns, and we've gone through a lot of we've been married 6.5 years. We've gone through a lot. And I just think it gave us a sense of security and I feel like we're running our own little business, right? It's our own little LLC, which is a nice aspect to have. But I think part of it, I think the question is almost flipped. I think because our marriage was so strong and because we're so similar, we're similar and complementary, right? I think if we didn't have that, we wouldn't be where we are today with the home buying process and investing. If we were on different pages, if we didn't see things eye to eye, if we didn't have the same goals, we would have never pulled the trigger right away on these things, and which led us down this road. So I would almost flip that question on the head is that you really, I always say that you have to have a strong foundation in terms of your marriage before you build anything else on it. And I think this is just another example of, we had a strong foundation. We were able to build this branch of investment properties from that because we had an understanding and we knew we had the same financial goals and same ideas of what our financial life should be like.
That's a wonderful perspective.
Yeah, I love that. Well, thank you guys so much for coming on the show. I think you guys had a lot of great information to say and to share with our viewers. I mean, I think it's really important to invest in homes. I mean, they appreciate like anything else, and the market's more predictable, right? Like than the stock market. So I think it's a tremendous investment. I think that's amazing that you guys are doing that.
Yeah, thank you for having us, and what you're doing is great as well. And yeah, I think again, it's critical, right? If you look at just one funny statistic I always mention, housing prices always go up every 10 years. You look at any 10-year period, 10 years previous, the houses are higher, even during the Great Depression, even during the Great Recession, whatever it is, you look at 1985 to 1995 or 2005 to 2015, et cetera, they always go up. So, and as I said, just do it, take that first step, and you'll learn along the way. And it'll, before you know it, you're like, oh my gosh, we have that portfolio.
Yeah, no, thanks for having us. For us, it's been a mix of luck, privilege, and planning. And we're happy to share that with others so others can have that success as well.
Good luck with your 5 before 50.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right.
Take care.
Bye.
Thank you to Waliya and Ismael for appearing on today's episode. I felt like we learned a lot about real estate investing.
Yes, and I appreciated what Waliya said about building that strong foundation, having that stable marriage that allows you to then go into business with your partner and do things like real estate investment.
Absolutely. And I like what Ismael mentioned about real estate investing being a long-term goal for them. The market is always appreciating, so it's always a good time to invest. And when you go to sell those properties, capitalizing on that 1031 exchange is something that's important because it's going to allow you to save a lot of money on the taxes to reinvest.
I didn't know that, but now I want to run out and buy a house, which is easy for me to say because my husband is a realtor.
That's right. If you have a real estate need, I'd be happy to help. You can always find me by clicking on the link in the description below.
And if you'd like to appear on a future episode, please reach out to houses.spouses@gmail.com. And don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss our episodes.
See you next time.